Hi everyone, my name's Ian Munro and welcome to a behind the scenes masterclass in association with Wex and Sony. I'm going to now tell you why I've changed after a decade. In this masterclass, we'll be delving into images past and present. We'll be looking at set builds, portraits, and taking pictures of people with wow. Usually, my approach to photography is somewhat different. It's based loosely around three elements, and that is portraits, set builds, and taking pictures of more than one person in the shot. Obviously, things get a bit complicated, and I can't do this alone, so I've got the lads at Skint, with Deeks and Gez, and they're always on hand to help create the images that I want and the portraits that I want to do. My portraits also, they're not the usual style. If you have a look on your screen now at the picture of Foxy, you'll be seeing a lot more of him throughout the presentation. And this is a standard, what I like to call a standard portrait. It's not a portrayal. That's where I like to change things up a bit. This portrait of Foxy is a standard portrait taken with a 3-light setup. You have 2 strip boxes, one either side, and also a beauty dish high and above just to punch some light into his face. Again, standard portrait, but to me, I feel that sometimes you can only go so far with so many different lighting setups. So in the next image you see, this is what we've done with Foxy. I think you'll agree that we've sort of, we've spivved him up a little bit to look like this character, this welder. And the ironic thing is he's cooking his sausage with the welding torch. Now to take this picture, it was just a 1-light setup, simple setup. And to be quite honest, I'm not too concerned about the lighting setup. I don't want to overcomplicate it. It's all about the storytelling in it. So this character you see in front, here he is, he's on his lunch break in the garage and he's cooking his sausage that's held in the wrench below in the hot flame to cook it. Also, you don't have to ask Foxy twice. Being an actor by trade, he jumps straight into the character that I tell him to and pulls all sorts of different expressions to suit the image. To take this image, it's a straight single image, straight from camera, apart from one aspect. The only thing was trying to get the torchlight, the gas light, to balance exposure-wise with the studio strobe lights. That proved problematic, really. So to quicken things up a bit, what we did, we lit a gas burner and took the flame against the same background in ambient light only. I then took that flame, blended it over the top, and voila. I also did the same with a smoke brush to put smoke on the sausage, and that's it. In terms of the pose and everything else, it's one image. So, moving on to the next image, what we've done now, the image that you see on your screen is called the chicken and the egg. Again, no messing around. We've used a real chicken. That was a laugh in itself, and very hard to do. You know what they say, don't photograph animals, don't mix them, people and animals. But we like to do things different at Skint Creative. We've popped a real chicken in Foxy's arms. We've been mindful about the composition. It has to sit right. The chicken has to face the right way. So many different things have to come together. The feathers, I mean, they're flying around and it's all taken in one image. The only thing I will add is the egg on his forehead. Okay, that's a real egg. And it was stuck on with some makeup glue by Sarah, our makeup artist. She stuck it onto his forehead and the egg was bulging, ready to burst. We took a few images of it and it was at that moment Gez and Deek said, you know something, we should take a pin and pop the egg and watch the yolk run down his face. And you know, while I was a bit skeptical, I thought, you know what, if it could be done, it would look fantastic. So we took the images we wanted to, that we were happy with, and when we were more or less finished, we thought, you know what, why not pop the egg? And The rest you can see on the image. We've popped the egg, quickly got out of the way, and the yolk has literally played ball and rolled down his face in a classic fashion. So that image is called the chicken and the egg. It's a simple lighting setup. All right, just one large parabolic light, softbox, pumping some light in. What you might call a classic Rembrandt look. Okay, again, he's been grunged up by Sarah, makeup-wise, and his hair made to look so greasy and dank. And that's the character we're trying to portray. The medal on his blazer, that's just a little adage. That's just something to get you looking around the portrayal, the character, and not the portrait. So moving on, in the next image, we thought that we would keep things going on this sort of theme and use Sarah's granddad, Dennis. Again, let's flip back. This is a portrait, not a portrayal. This is Dennis as we know him. Okay, now the thing is with this, it's a beautiful portrait. Again, one light setup, and it's something for the family to keep and Sarah to keep. Now, Dennis's sort of mood and his look, I thought he would suit a character that could quite play the part of an old-time technician or engineer that built a rocket pack. So what we're going to do in the next image is we're going to grunge him up, we're going to make him up. Again, all affordable props. This is now Dennis in his Rocket Man suit. It's a simple red boiler suit. The helmet was bought on eBay for a couple of pounds along with the stickers. And the rocket pack on his back is actually a fireman's breathing apparatus that was thrown away. I've taken it, changed it up a bit, sprayed it gold, and strapped it to his back. The hand placed on his thigh, the way his other hand is holding the helmet. The bottom base plates you see underneath the rocket pack, I had a friend weld some bits of plate on and some other addages to the top of the cylinder to create this rocket pack look. Once it was sprayed up, it looked fantastic. Now, I'm afraid Deeks drew the short straw, and he's actually underneath Dennis, lighting the fireworks that we have taped inside the base plates underneath the rocket pack. As you can see, it adds a great effect. And while this is all happening, because the cylinder is quite heavy, Gez is actually holding the cylinder tight to Dennis's back. Dennis is 84 years of age, so he found it quite hard sitting bolt upright for long periods of time. So now, when you look at it and you see it, you know that there's been 3 people involved in just the setting up of this shot. So again, even though the lighting is simple, it's effective and it's enough without overcomplicating things. It's all about the story. So that's Dennis in the rocket pack, and Sarah was responsible this time for grunging up his face, hairstyling him to have this sort of stark, shocked look, you know, and he's got that steely, determined look that he's going to make this rocket pack fly. I love this image. It is one of my favorites. And again, I'm just trying to explain to you about the transition of a regular portrait to a portrayal. So as you can see from the image of Dennis, most of the portraits and portrayals, character portrayals that we do, they're based at a studio and using obviously studio lights. Now, as time have gone on, I've wanted to expand, try other ideas, try other things. And the logical sort of thing to do would be to increase more people, to use more people, different characters, and tell different stories. So the image you see on your screen right now, that is an image containing 3 of my friends. It's called Brass Monkeys, and it, again, is a studio shot with a 3-light setup. Left and right, you have Foxy and Hugh, and they are lit with 2 long strip boxes. And high and above is Nick. He's lit with a beauty dish with a soft sock on the front. I was mindful to sort of watch for the reflections in the brass instruments. They are beat up somewhat, so they were throwing light all over the place. Now, the other thing we did to sort of dirty these characters up, as if they're some sort of hustling band that go around the street, they're a bit worse for wear, or even, do you know what, even jolly characters that like a drink and they're just having some fun. But either way, we've scruffed them up somewhat, we've tipped some talcum powder over them and dirtied them up. And I think the composition sits well, with Nick being the tallest in the middle, followed by Hugh and Foxy on either flank. What I like about it is the fact that the dust from the talc on the suits brings out the detail. And also, I did use the liquefy tool just to plump up Nick's eyes in the center somewhat, and also on the left-hand side of the image, Hugh's cheek. But again, the one thing in my mind when photographing more than one person is to keep them on the same plane of focus. By doing that, you can virtually guarantee that your images are sharp. And if you were to stagger people in front and behind the other, then obviously you'd have to maybe mask one, two, or more images together. But with this being a simple composition and a very sort of humorous shot, then I've kept them all on the same plane. So that was a studio-based image with 3 lights, and that got me thinking about something else. Now, the next image that comes up on the screen, this one's called Tubtails. And what I like about this, you have on the left at the back, you have Nick. In the center, you have Pip. And right at the front, you have my dear past friend, now Terry. And if you're not grinning at the moment, then there's something absolutely wrong with you, because the laugh that we had doing this, if you could imagine myself and Terry in the front, driving to a location to pick up a cast iron bathtub. That was heavy in itself, and to get it in the back of the car is a story in itself. Now, we've come back, we've refurbished the bath and painted it up. And again, it's taken in the studio with 2 lights. One strip light at the back, lighting Nick, and the main key light will be at the front, lighting Terry. Now, we had to mix up some soap suds, get some sort of water going, but we obviously didn't want to fill the bathtub. The other thing that you might not be aware of is, what are they sat on? How do they all fit in there? Because I can tell you something, men of that age, they really do have creaks and crunches and all sorts. So you can imagine the absolute carnage that was happening in the studio on that day. So in the end, you're looking at 3 gentlemen sat on paint tins to perch them up. And they've literally, they've kept their underwear on, I have you know, and also they've literally, sort of for want of a better word, they've butted up to each other, okay, for the shot. Now, apart from moaning and grizzling about the shot itself and making me promise that I wouldn't air the image anyway, we've got on with the shot. And again, being mindful of the composition, I've placed Nick at the back being taller, followed by Pip, followed by Terry. And I think it sits well. Terry in front, obviously, I wanted some eye contact with models as well, but not all. And also giving Terry the model airplane in the front really did add to the whole sort of experience of it. But again, the little things like the soap suds on the floor, they're all real. This is one shot, and that's what you see straight out of camera. We really loved doing that. Yes, it was a laugh, but again, it was another experiment using more than one person to tell a story or a portrayal. And yeah, again, they were pretty quick to put their hairnets on and jump into character and get in the bathtub. But this image is called Tubtails, and during this time now, I'm thinking about expanding to the next phase, which will probably be using more of the environment to tell a story with the characters that I got. Rather than use props, use a complete environment to make the viewer feel that they're in possibly a subject's living room or place of work or whatever it is. But either way, next step will be the set builds. So that's studio-based shots taken with more than one person, and ever trying to produce better work, bigger productions. Then we've moved on to the image that you see on your screen now. That's the Ejector Inspectors, and it's a story about 3 characters inventing the ejection seat. Okay, now you can appreciate that the story that comes with this probably has a lot of pitfalls, and there was a lot of test trials where things went wrong. As you can see on the right hand side, you have Andy, my friend, and on the left you have Foxy, who you're already familiar with earlier in the presentation. And above, you'll see a pair of legs dangling and some of the ceiling falling in. You can see that the person's been fired up so hard out of his boots with the spring that's on the chair that he shot through the ceiling where they've got it wrong. Now, this image is quite easy to set up. The wall behind is just a plastered wall that's been grunged up with paint and water, just to make it look like a bit of an industrial environment. And the chair, the table, the map on the left-hand side, and some gauges, they were all added purely for compositional purposes and to make it a bit of a sort of laboratory environment. Okay, the chair is raised up on a pallet just to give it that little bit of extra elevation, and Foxy is actually holding a plastic pipe as a lever that's hidden behind, a kind of sort of lever that you can pull to release the ejector seat. Now, the next image shows you pretty much what goes into making this set. As you're probably looking now and laughing to yourself and thinking, how the heck did we get away with putting a ladder on top of a flight case and also an iron bar running horizontally across the top to another step ladder, where I climbed up the ladder, shimmied across the pipe and dropped my trousers and dandled my legs above, okay? The idea behind this is to get as much as I can done in camera and not use Photoshop to composite any images. I like my images to remain as original as possible. And again, this is where we took one image of my legs in this position, and the next image that you see on your screen right now is where I am now stood on a chair, dropping pieces of tree bark whilst we're triggering the flash to capture the tree bark falling down, okay? So that's another image, image number 2. You have my legs. Yes, they are my legs. You have my legs, you have the bark from the tree coming down, and that in itself makes up the image, really. There's sort of 3 shots. So in the image you can see now on your screen, then you'll see that I'm directing the models in the position that I want them to be. Okay, so it really is quite a simple setup. There's probably 3 images masked over the top of each other, and the smoke in the boots that are added at the end, just to suggest that I've been shot out of the seat and fired up through the ceiling. But this was a basic sort of, I'll call it a set build. We used 2 flat boards, 8 foot by 4 foot on the left-hand side. The wall was already there at the studio, and we've just laid some pallets on the floor to make a wooden floor. So that's the Ejector Inspectors, and we loved doing it, to be honest. We had some fun, but always there was something in the back of my mind to go bigger and better and introduce more of a production, and also to get friends involved and people involved, so things became a lot more complex in the images that you're about to see. So, as I said earlier, the portraits that I do usually run alongside the images that take longer to make, longer to build. That usually means building a set that can take anything from a week to maybe 3 months to do, okay? Because basically we source our stuff from scrap yards, salvage yards, friends, and any old junk that people are throwing out. We don't really have the privilege of a budget, so we make do with what we can. So the initial idea behind the image that's up on your screen right now, that is an image called Time After Time, where Jacob Cogwright would travel back in time to memorable moments in time. And right now, he's gone back to September 1955, as you can see, and that infamous Marilyn Monroe moment where the air vent on the ground blew her dress up. Now, what I like about this image is that it challenged us in different ways. Yes, there's more than one person in the shot, but it was the set build and blending ambient light with studio light. So, upon looking at this image closely, you can see that I've used a number of things, but they're all junk and they're all superficial things. So on the right-hand side, you can see there's a huge plastic dustbin lid acting as a portal time door. And attached to that, there's a steering wheel, a kiddie steering wheel that I've sprayed gold. And also around the area, you can see things such as washing machine doors lit up, and also an old satellite dish up in the top left-hand corner. The gadgets and gizmos you see in front are oscilloscopes and old keyboards. There's some old fans. There's even an old car exhaust there. What I've done then is I've added extra lights. They're actually sort of disco nightclub lights. They're constant lights, and they've added the blues and the sort of pink hues to the image. What I was faced with more than anything with this image was getting two things right. The studio and ambient light balanced, because I'm sure there's something around about 1/4 of a second to keep the ambient light in. And also, Rebecca, who's playing Marilyn, getting her dress to flow correct. There's no Photoshop there, so the only way around that was to take two shots. One with Andy, playing Jacob Cogwright to your left as the time traveller, and then take another shot of Rebecca on the right with one of my colleagues, one of my friends, on his knees underneath Marilyn's dress, blowing a fan upside her dress to get it flowing right. And what I like about it is the shutter speed is low enough just to introduce some flow to the image. That's an image called Time After Time. I personally love it, and I think it's most appreciated when it's printed large, okay? And just to give you some idea, the next image that's coming up on your screen now, this is the area that we built the set in. Now, what you're looking at is something essentially that's 9 foot tall and around about 20 foot wide. So you can see we started with this bare studio space. We've painted the background wall grey, and we've introduced, again, some 8x4 studio flats, bits of junk. Now, the next image, that's pretty much the image as you see, without anything being plugged in, lit up, or dressed in any way. And what you've got is, you've got your plain grey wall, plain concrete grey floor, and if it wasn't about the amount of ambient light and constant light added, I don't think this image would carry the atmosphere that I would have desired to have. So that image, that's Time After Time, and I think if I remember rightly, that was an image that took off and on probably 2 or 3 months to source and make. So there's a hell of a lot of effort gone into that, but you know what, it's worth it. And it gets to the point where we actually think more about the set build and the creation and the story, and we think less and less about gear, about cameras, about lights, about anything else. It's all about the fun and camaraderie that goes with making sets like this. So moving on, the one thing we did learn from the Time After Time image was that after the image was taken, things seemed so empty afterwards, and we began to think about creating more from characters, getting more, so we could use them more, essentially. So we moved on to another series. Usually we can get about 2 or 3 of these per year. That's how long it takes to build the set. Bringing people together and, you know, using the time wisely, because all the models that I use, they aren't models. They're friends and relatives and colleagues, and basically you'll see them a lot used again and again. They're obviously suckers for punishment, but ultimately they do enjoy it, I enjoy it, and it brings the team closer together. So moving on, we decided to use the same studio space, but create something different. And this occasion, I thought we could use a family, husband, wife, and son. So the picture you see on your screen at the moment, this is the first of the Endeavour series. I call it Endeavour because Oscar Crothers, who you see down on his knees on the left-hand side, he endeavours to make these inventions that are going to make the family wealthy and successful. It's a story about all the failures, all the things that go wrong, and the fact that his ever-supporting wife, Martha, in the background there, holding on to her headphones and her ears for the noise, really watching son Peter be blasted off with a bit of luck due to the rocket pack that Oscar Crothers, aka Foxy, who you've seen earlier in the presentation, hopefully he's going to be whisked up and the first person to sort of fly using a rocket pack. So you can interpret this however you want. Was it a success? Was it a failure? You know, the story can pan out as you like. But what we did do is we took these characters and we did individual portrayals of these characters. So they were dressed up. You can see Foxy's hair that have been backcombed. Sarah, who's playing Martha, her makeup and hair. It takes a lot of time and effort that Sarah have gone into, my stylist, to make this look and get this look happening correct. So also the costumes that we picked up from a friend, everything is done on a shoestring of a budget, but I think we succeed in telling the story. Once again, it's the studio space, but this time some different flats that have been added, wallpapered with a brick effect, recycled fans, and as you can see, Peter Crothers is stood on the same springs that were used, but they were black in the Ejector Inspectors image earlier. So we recycle a lot, we use a lot, and on the left-hand side, we made a sort of bookcase shelf affair where we've put some laboratory glassware on, and I've used some fairy lights behind to backlight them and put inside some sort of water with food colouring to add some more sort of colour, light and ambient mood to that corner. The chalkboard that you see now, it's actually not a chalkboard, it's just the wall painted black, but we've surrounded it with some wooden trim, and on there are some cryptic messages for family, friends, people I'd like to thank, etc. I won't go into it right now, but they're there, they know they are, and again, it took a whole lot of effort to do this. The smoke you see, it's real. Gez, one of my friends, have come in from the right-hand side. He's puffed the smoke up to capture it in camera. So this image is actually one straight image. The one thing I will say again is things are starting to challenge me now in terms of having people on different planes. You've got Peter that's at the forefront of the picture, followed by Oscar in the middle, with Martha, the wife, right at the back of the room. So I'm mindful about the f-stop and the sharpness, okay? But again, focus points and stuff, by this point, things are on my mind a bit about the capabilities of the camera and the stuff that I'm using. But we've added the wooden floor in after this time. And again, we've used a combination of ambient light, the light from the glassware and behind the glassware, the light on top of the copper lever on the left-hand side, and also the top right-hand side, a sort of bulkhead light to mix some ambient with flash again. Okay, so the next image that you see is the space that we had before we started the Endeavour series. There are 3 images in the series, and on the right-hand side, you'll see some 8x4 studio flats. Also, if you look closely and you see across the top, apart from there being a lot of my junk and a couple of soft boxes and stuff, you can see an iron bar running across the top. So on the next picture, there I am looking quite smug and proud of myself, but I wanted you to see the light above on the clipped onto the iron bar. It's a long strip box, and that gave us some light dropping down onto the chalkboard behind and also lighting Martha up enough. The other lights that we added one strip box to the right-hand side where Peter is on his springs, and a soft box just pumping in some fill light to Foxy, who's down on his knees, Oscar, who's down on his knees. And this is the kind of picture you can see on your screen now where it's just the available light. So we haven't switched any of the fairy lights on behind. We've just switched the one bulkhead light on the right-hand side and the old vintage light bulb that's on the near the copper lever on the left. So once I switch on the fairy lights, that's literally the only light that we have to work with. So again, I'm using settings of f8, and you're looking around about 20th of a second as well. So at the time of directing this, I'm telling people to sit still, stand still, shush, don't breathe, just to make sure that the image is sharp. But again, that's another example of the set builds. And as you can see, we're ever increasing the amount of production that goes into them. And it's becoming more and more of a thing about the environment, the story, the characters, rather than the technicalities, the camera, the lens, the lights is starting to mean nothing apart from being an available tool that's suitable for the job. So the Journeyman was born over 10 years now, and back then the camera's capabilities were not as good as they are now. A lot of the scenes that you see on your screen now in front of you and the images, the Journeyman would always be in locations that were challenging. I relied an awful lot on natural light. So if you notice, I position myself quite cleverly against windows or somewhere that casts a natural diffused light. By doing this and being in these darker places, you also run the risk of changing your settings a lot, ramping the ISO up, and also struggling with focus points. So what I did at the time to overcome this, that took a hell of a lot of time to do, I would place an object where I would stand, focus on that object, switch it from automatic to manual focus, set it to a timer and take the shot. This resulted in a lot of images that were wasted, and over the years kind of found that I was losing a lot of work, especially the images that I wanted, because I was in locations for a limited time only. A lot of the time it was quite dark, so over time it wasn't until I used a Sony a7R4, one of my friends, that I realized the change in technology. A couple of things I noticed, first of all, that I really needed to carry on with the Journeyman series was to get a better keeper rate of the images. I needed something that would autofocus, auto-track. The Sony has this, and also a great dynamic range so I can pull and push the files to get the right exposure that I want in challenging conditions. The other thing is the ISO capabilities of the Sony, absolutely superb. You can start off at 1000 ISO without it interfering with any of the print quality. So looking back, the change took a long time to happen, but now it's happened. There's a lot more doors that have opened for the Journeyman going forward. I can also now introduce the Journeyman into a studio environment using lights, building sets around the Journeyman, also as well as going out alone. That's where I'll benefit most, is using the camera on a tripod alone, being out on location and knowing that I'm going to get that shot 100% of the time. This saves me time, and also, as you can appreciate, being in locations that are quite sort of, subject to being there, you don't need to be hanging around for a hell of a long time. So this saves me a lot of work. So speaking about bringing characters into a studio environment and building sets around them, I was browsing the internet looking for some inspiration. I get my ideas from everywhere: TV, film, adverts, you name it. I'm browsing the internet, and this gentleman you see on your screen now comes up, and this gentleman is John Philip Holland. He's the inventor of the first battle-ready wartime submarine. This image was taken in 1899, 1900, and as soon as I saw it, I thought, wow, that looks just like a Journeyman image. If you look at his bowler hat and his dark suit at the time, I really wanted to set myself a challenge of replicating this image. What I wanted to do exactly was pit my wits against this image with the technology of today. With this Sony a7R4, 61 megapixels that'll deliver great depth, great sharpness and texture. So I endeavoured to start making the submarine and make it identical right down to the last nut and bolt. Obviously we used different materials, whether it was sort of MDF, cardboard, etc., and set about making it. What we wanted to do is put the two images side by side to see how times have changed over the last sort of 120 years. So the next image you see on your screen now, this is John our model, and as you can see we've produced a replica of the Holland Submarine. There's a lot of 3D print work going on for the sort of detailing work, and the cone itself is made out of just hard card painted down. The base is 2 sheets of plasterboard, and we have a hand-painted canvas backdrop hanging behind. So again, we have one main key light, as you can see, coming in from the right-hand side, shining on John's face, and a smaller second light just to fill the left-hand side of the image. Now, even though the original image was taken outdoors, we decided to do it in a controlled studio environment. This gave us time to sort of build the sub, etc. And as I'm looking at it, moving on, I'm thinking to myself, if you remember earlier on in the presentation, I spoke about bringing the Journeyman indoors and putting my own twist on things. So with that in mind, we set about trying to create a story for the Journeyman where he could be replaced in the submarine, but we needed to add a few extras. As you can see now, there I am in said submarine. But this time the submarine's been sunk to the bottom of the ocean for a number of years, and now it's been risen, the Journeyman is inside, with a fish hanging out of his mouth and a fish in his top pocket. Yes, my suit is wet and there's all sorts of sea life and seaweed hanging around the sub. There's bits of gravel and all sorts, and the sub cone is beat up rather than there's holes in the side. But what I've managed to do with this is tell a story of the Journeyman, add my trademark sort of humour in it, and also the unbelievable detail and texture that the Sony camera brings when it comes to working indoors in a studio environment. You can really, really push those files in terms of exposure. The next image you'll see on your screen right now is just a crazy zoom in on my hands and knuckles, and you can just see the texture of the conning tower of the submarine and the eye hook that was made out of 3D plastic on top. And look at the grime and texture in my fingernails and all the dirt. The main advantage of this image came within the face auto tracking. I was able to put the camera on a tripod and with my glasses on, throwing all sorts of reflections to the studio lights, plus the bowler hat on with the rim that was covering my eyes, the Sony still managed to pick up on auto tracking. If I was to cast my mind back, well, let's just say a year ago, I can see me perhaps getting the image, but it would have taken a hell of a lot longer to get. My keeper rate, there was a number of times we could use smoke in the image, different lighting, knowing that we could move with confidence to get the image that we need. But as you can see, there's a lot of humour in it. It's new artwork that have come out, and I'm very confident of printing this as a feature and printing it very, very large. So, finally, as a comparison, you can see these three images now in a bit of a triptych. You've got one on the left 120 years ago. The one in the middle is John, namesake. He's posing as John is posing as John Philip Holland 120 years ago, which in itself is a good image. But then we've taken the sub and we've distressed it, we've added stuff to it, and we've put my own twist on it. Very fun shoot to do. And the other thing is that I'd like to mention is you can always develop an image into something else. So like I said earlier, we wanted to replicate the image, but we also wanted to go beyond this and really push the camera and its capabilities to the max. So very happy with this new work. And that is pretty much a good triptych in terms of telling a story. So there you have it. A quick whistle-stop tour over the last decade or more. Now, I'd like to thank Wex and Sony again for giving me the opportunity to do this. And also, more importantly, I'd like to thank you for tuning in and listening and putting up with me. If you'd like any more info or you'd like to get in touch, you can always visit my website or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Until then, guys, until the next time, thanks very much.